Is using a CNC router cheating when it comes to woodworking? What do you reckon? Right then, look, the question is really very simple, and I know it's something that upsets a vast amount of people. If you want to cause an argument, you want to do a bit of trolling on a woodworking forum or a Facebook group, by all means, you go over there and ask them that question, and you will get hundreds of comments of people who are one side or the other. There's people who sit there and look at it as though it's a tool. There's people who sit there and absolutely hate it. But what do you think? Are you a purist? Do you think that hand tools are the only tools? Do you think that power tools are okay? Do you think that CNC router is okay? You let me know in the comments below, right? And then we'll get into it. Right then, so you might be asking yourself, Josh, why do you have an opinion on this? Well, I would say that I am probably pretty darn well placed for this, bearing in mind that opinions are like arseholes and everybody has one. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're right, but I would argue that I have a fair say on this because I run a professional woodworking business. Professional woodworking, carpentry, joinery, whatever you want to call it. That's what I do for a living. It's how I feed the kids, it's how I pay the bills, and this is just what I do. Right, everything from handmade canoes to menu blocks to gates to all of it. I do all of it. And I use every single tool that I possibly can do because it's a business, right? Efficiency is everything and time is money, ladies and gentlemen. So I need to save time so that I can make more money. That being said, there are the purists out there who say that anything other than hand tools isn't proper woodworking. Now, to that, I would say you're talking rubbish, right? There's quite a few people that I chat to on Instagram quite often, a lot of the time, and their work is immaculate. I can't even talk, it's so good. Gates, sash windows, you know, internal joinery, external joinery. And they use machines. There's a gentleman called James who I talk to quite often. He makes some amazing, beautiful sash windows, and he uses a little spindle moulder for getting the beading on there. He'll use his table saw or his little panel saw for cutting down. Is there anything wrong with that? I don't think so. I think that's perfectly fair. And I reckon that all of the old timers 100 years ago, 50 years ago would be like, give me that tool if you gave them the opportunity. And personally, I don't see that there's any issue with that. We're not in the dark ages, it's not all mortise and tenons and pegs, and that's just the way that it is. Times change, things move on, and you know, sometimes you just gotta get with the times, right? There was a time that if you used an impact driver on a building site, the old schoolers would kick off with you. I worked, when I was working on a building site, when I started off, impact drivers were just about coming out. Everybody hated them because they were noisy. Do you see a chippy without an impact driver anymore? No, you don't. I remember when I was maybe 5 or 6, I helped my dad fit a deck outside in the garden. All the holes, everything had to be pre-drilled with an old Black & Decker drill, you know, the ones with the little speed controller on the trigger. And then what we did is every single hole, and there was probably about 4,000 or 5,000 little holes, they all had to be pre-drilled. And we put a little screwdriver bit in there, and then everything had to be pushed right in because there was no such thing as a battery powered drill back then. So, like I said, things change. Times move on. So then we get onto the CNC router. Now, this is something that creates so much upset. I can't figure out why it creates all the problems. Is it because it's taking a lot of like the guesswork out of it? Is it because it's supposed to be super easy? Is it because you do it on a computer and people don't like computers? I don't know. But I will tell you from my experience, they are not easy to use. There is a huge amount of work that goes into using one. You've got the design work, then you need to understand the machining capabilities, you need to understand what you can do, what you can't do, your feed speeds, depth of cuts, chip feeds, what your machine is really capable of, and what the bits are capable of. Do you use a 1 flute, 2 flute? Do you use a carbide bit? Do you use a router bit? How quick can you plunge in there? How quick can you feed it through the material? Is it different for different types of material? And I guarantee you, yes it is. If you're running something through pine or softwood, it's a lot easier than it is if you were running something through birch ply. Oak, walnut, they're all different and they all require a certain amount of skill to be able to use them. I guess where the argument comes from is that it's not woodworking, is that you just program the machine, you click go and off it goes. But if that's all you're doing, then I can see the argument that it's not proper woodworking. However, if you're programming the machine to cut apart so that you can then install that in a project, then I don't necessarily see the problem with it. If you're using it to cut panels, what is the difference between using a panel saw or a table saw or a site saw to cut the panels down as opposed to using the machine to cut it? There isn't one. It's just that way is a huge amount more expensive than the original. If the argument is, well, it's not proper joinery, man, there's a huge amount of ways that you can put fillets in, and there's dog bone fillets, and there's internals, externals. You can create little fillets and little joins, so you can have your own little mortise and tenons on those panels, and you can pop them in. Man, when I do laser cutting, I can cut little sections out and the panel licks push out, and then we can pop a little pin in there to keep that in there. Is that not joinery just because I've used the machine to do it? Is it a jealousy thing? Is it because, well, you know, they've got that tool and I haven't got that tool? Is it because they must have that money to be able to do that and I don't? I don't know. From my point of view, right, honestly, I don't see the issue with it. As long as you're not sitting there saying, oh, you know, this beautiful handmade piece of furniture, when it clearly isn't handmade because you've used a machine to do it. But then the argument comes like handcrafted or handmade. There's a massive difference as far as I'm concerned as a business owner on something that I sell that's handcrafted to something that's handmade. When I sell a canoe, I'm very honest with people and say, look, I use a CNC router to cut the panels out. Everything after that is done by hand. But then you've got to ask the question, is using power tools a cheat? But I guess that's a video for another time, right? So, in my opinion, no. There is nothing wrong at all with using a CNC router as long as you're honest with the client, honest with the customer, and you're honest with yourself on what you're using it for, right? Are you using it to cut the panels out? Are you using it to cut bits of joinery in there? Are you just using it to cut apart and put it into the product? Or are you sitting there cutting something out and pretending that you've scrolled sawed that out? Which that is out of order. So then, now I've riled up about 50, 60, 70% of you. You tell me in the comments below what you think. Be honest with me, but be polite, right? It's not as though any of you are going to come down here and start kicking off with me in person, so don't be doing it in the comments because that's bang out of order, right? Now, you let me know. Like I said, I'm genuinely interested in what you think. I'm not here to tell anybody that they're right or wrong. Just giving my opinion, just giving you my 2 cents on it. All right? You have a great day. You take it easy and I shall catch you on the next one. Oh, and a quick one. If there is anything else that you would like me to talk about that's an unpopular opinion, you just let me know because I have got about 15 or 20 of them to go through. So maybe what I'll do is I'll start popping some polls up. Everyone can vote what they want and then that's what we'll do next. All right, you have a great one. Take it easy.